Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming for this first seminar that we are running in the series Interactions. So the whole series is about putting together art leaders, cultural innovators, free thinkers in the fields of creative industries to give you more inspiration about the whole sector and to help you to figure out what you will do next, right, in your life. So today we have this really interesting seminar because we are celebrating, first of all, our star alumni. We are celebrating people who has already achieved some amazing results in their careers, so they can share with you some of their perspectives and some tips, right, and some knowledge and experience how they are navigating this very complex field of arts management, right? And what is arts management? Because a couple of weeks ago there was this open house, right? And I had a lot of future students joining us for that event, and many of them was like, what is arts management? Can you tell me what? What is it? It's very difficult to answer this question, right? What is arts management? What are you actually doing when you pursuing a career in arts management? But we are going to discuss this today. So, and I'm very happy also to say that our moderator today is also our alumna, and she's a part-time lecturer with us, and we are very grateful for her support and all her everything she is bringing to the program, a lot of her enthusiasm, knowledge. So Shereen Marican, you all know her, right? She will be moderating the event. I'm also very happy to invite today to the floor Dr. Kim Goodwin, who is joining us from Melbourne. So she's writing a very interesting book about arts management careers right now, and she is collecting interviews in Singapore and Hong Kong for her new book. So she's today with us to share some of your very interesting framework, right, about arts management careers. So yeah, and I just would like to invite, and please give a loud applause for Dr. Kim Goodwin.
I haven't turned this off, so thank you, Natalia. I might walk around, because if I stand here, I'm literally in the way, aren't I? Yeah, so I will move. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you. I'm really excited to be here. As Natalia said, I'm here conducting interviews about the book that I'm writing, which is literally on this topic, on how to build a career in the arts. And I will tell you a little bit about that journey because I think it is slightly relevant. I feel like I've got a soundtrack going on. And I will apologise, as you can see, I had to get about 15 metres in the rain, and that 15 metres made me look like this. Yeah. I'm from Melbourne, we're not used to rain that's trying to kill you. That's what this did. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is a framework that I've been developing for, I can't believe I'm saying this, 10 years now. And it's this idea of the intersecting concepts of careers, community, and the arts. My background is and it's interesting, Natalia said, what is arts management? People come to study at this university or this college and say, I want to do arts management. I had no idea what arts management was when I started my career. I graduated with a commerce degree because I wasn't smart enough to get into law, which is what my parents wanted me to do. But like many of you, I wanted to work in the arts, but I didn't know how because I wasn't talented. I didn't make things. I didn't paint or create films, but I knew I wanted to work in this industry. And I didn't know, but arts management, because I'm a little bit older than everyone here, didn't exist. There were no arts management degrees. So it's taken a long time to get to the point where you're all sitting in this room with a qualification in this, which is exciting. But interestingly, I just interviewed someone here, about 500 metres away, who said she knew she wanted to be an arts manager from when she was 15. And I said, how did you know that? And it's because she used to live near your other campus. So things are definitely changing. People are joining this career, they're joining this idea of wanting to be arts managers from a much earlier age than what we did. I'd like to start by acknowledging in Australia at the beginning of any meeting and any presentation, we acknowledge the land that we are undertaking meeting on. So in Australia, the land belongs to the First Nations people, the Indigenous people of Australia. So I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people, the people of Melbourne, who are the traditional custodians of the land in which I did this research. But also pay respect to any First Nations peoples around the world and where we meet today. And First Nations leadership is actually really interesting in the concepts that we're talking about because it's built on this idea of community and collective leadership, which is something that is very akin to what happens in arts and culture. I should say, if you have any burning questions, feel free to shout out, put your hand up and interject. I'm very happy if you do that. So you probably know all of this, but it's important to understand the arts context. And one thing that I was worried about coming here today was I'm an Australian, and my research that I started for this book, which was my PhD, was all done in Australia. So all around Australia, but all in one country. And I was a little bit worried that the message wouldn't be the same and the experiences wouldn't be the same. But I've spent the week talking to people here, and I'm pretty confident that the messages translate. So I think we'll be fine. But you probably know this already, but the arts employment landscape is dominated by precarious work. The vast majority of artists and arts workers around the world work in organisations that are under 20 people, and the vast majority do not have full-time permanent 9-to-5 jobs where they get regular salaries, which probably makes all your parents really happy when you say this is where you want to work. Yeah. Well, it's true, because I'm sure, yeah. We piece together our jobs. Yeah, everyone hold hands. We piece together our jobs out of casual, part-time contracts, a lot of unpaid work, too much unpaid work. Pay your artists, please, when you have the ability to do so. And we are also in a situation, I'm sorry to tell you, that we have too many qualified people. There are more qualified people in Australia, like more artists and arts workers with master's degrees than almost any other sector. We keep raising the bar, we keep saying you need an extra degree. Like the barriers to entry in the arts are very, very high. And so we have all of these wonderful, talented graduates like you in the room, and often not enough employment for them, not enough traditional jobs. But, and I'm sure, I hope you all agree with this, arts workers are very passionate about what they do, and they do it for a reason. We do it because, I'm not going to say we were born to it. The person I interviewed before, she was clearly born to it. But we do it because we get excitement and joy and satisfaction, and we're often more satisfied than people in other industries, despite the fact that we don't get paid enough. So which is not, yeah. But don't let people capitalise on that. That's probably my first message. Just because you love it doesn't mean you don't deserve to be paid. The other, and this is the good news, is that creativity, and you all know this, creativity is a skill that everybody wants and is willing to pay for. You know, I spent 10 years of my working life working for American Express and banks like ANZ, and they all want to be the next Google or the next Apple or the next ByteDance, and they're willing to pay creative people to help them get there. So even if you don't know what your job is, you have the skills to build a good career, and that's important. So I mentioned that I have this framework. So 10 years ago, I started looking at how we develop leaders in the arts. And I'm still doing it today through various iterations. And it comes down to these three concepts. The first is the careers landscape. There is no clear pathway in arts and culture. If you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school and then you become a resident and then you move into and it's a very linear step-by-step process. That doesn't exist in the arts. No one's telling you, here are the entry point jobs. Some mix creative work with managerial work and out of necessity, but others come from managerial into the arts. So we come from all different places, and I'm sure you come from all different places as well. So how do we build a satisfying and sustainable career? That's the first question we're trying to understand. The second big concept that I want you to think about is this idea of community. And I mean community in a particular way. So community is central to building arts careers. And I'll introduce you to this concept of a career community. A career community are what's known as social learning spaces. They are places that you participate in that address your professional identity. They teach you what being an arts manager is, or an arts worker. I tend to use arts worker rather than arts manager because this applies to creatives as well, to musicians, to theatre performers, to visual artists. Doesn't matter. Anyone in the arts. In fact, here's the secret. This applies to any profession, but I'm particularly interested in the arts. So these career communities are places where we learn skills and places where we form our identity, our professional identity. This space, this college is one of them, but it's not the only one. In fact, it's probably the least important one. There are other places that you're doing this. So how do you build a career community? What can you do? And the third concept, and maybe this is the end goal, but I don't think it is, I think it's inherent to it, is this idea of leadership. And leadership is essential for those who do want to progress, and it's essential for building of a sustainable arts industry. I've been really surprised this week, stupidly. I keep forgetting how young the cultural policy here is, the arts organisations here are. Leadership is crucial. You're growing an industry. The Arts Council, I think, is 20 years old. Am I right? Something like, or less than 20 years old. Whereas the Arts Council of the UK is, significantly older. The Arts Council of Australia, we're 50 years old, which is still young in global terms. So leadership is important. But if you joined a bank, you'd get put on a training program. You'd be given money to go and do an MBA, or you'd be put into leadership classes. I've been in the arts 15 years. I've never been sent to a leadership training program yet. There are a couple, but about 4 people a year get to go on them. So how do we develop leaders in a sector with no formal structures and no money? Lots going on here, but I'll explain it. Now, I'm going to make an assumption. We've got quite a diverse age range in the room. I'm not going to ask everyone to tell me how old they are. But it's important to know that the way careers have worked since post-World War II has changed. It's important because this is probably the world your parents knew, a lot of you. Traditionally, you went to school, or maybe a trade, or then you went to college or university, and then you got a job, and then you just jumped up the ladder. You stepped up, you often stayed in the one organisation. My father joined his organisation when he was 15, and he was there until he retired. And I would say to him, Dad, what should I do when I had some job questions? And he would say, I don't know, because we work in completely different worlds. So you've got to remember that a lot of our parents, and even, I will say, my husband, who's been in the same organisation for 27 years, they work in this step ladder model, which is a traditional careers model. We all exist in that squiggle mess, because that's the world, and it's not really just the arts world, it is the whole world. Careers have changed for everyone. What has happened is the idea of a psychological contract, this is a sort of an HR concept, has broken down. We used to say, I'm going to come and work for you, and in return you'll give me a salary, but you will also look after me and give me a career and teach me things and promote me. That doesn't exist anymore. For right or wrong. You know, the neoliberal world, cultural policy shifts, economic shifts, it just doesn't exist. What happens now is the person who is responsible to build a career is you. No one else is going to pick you up and put you where you want to be, unfortunately. Now, we can spend a lot of time critiquing that, but we won't, because we'll move on. So this organisational view of careers has changed, and we now are in what's called a boundaryless career, which means we transcend boundaries, organisations, types of roles, pay structures. There are no limits to what we can do. The good way to look at that is that it's freedom. You can choose when to work, how to work, where. You can choose to change career quite easily. It's a lot simpler to do different things now. The downside, of course, is there's a lot of risk and all the responsibility sits on you. And this is how we end up with hustle culture. So this is our context. There are good things about it and there are bad things about it. So how do we survive? And my research came down to this one idea, this idea of community. Career communities are a community of practice. So a community of practice, for those of a theoretical mindset, are spaces where you participate in discussion, activities and learning. You have shared interests and you develop a shared practice, knowledge, methods, stories, ideas. But the key thing is you're participating in something together. So obviously school and learning can be that. That's a formal community. The communities that I'm talking about exist outside of the educational framework. They are the communities that you go out and join, and you probably are part of them, but you might not know. But they're the groups that teach you all the skills that you need to learn. Can anyone think of a community they're part of that might fall into this definition? This is the audience interaction section. Anyone? Oh, it's just like Australia. You must be part of them. Who's involved in an art form? Who's in a band? Who's in a theatre group? That's a community of practice. These are places you go. Who's a member of a group that you just hang out at lunchtime and talk about things? That can be a community of practice. So they're not clearly defined. If you're involved in the craft community, if you get together and knit, that's a community of practice. So these little groups become very important in the building of your career, but we don't necessarily recognise it and we don't necessarily acknowledge it. So lots here. It's all in a paper you can find if you Google me. But what I found is people who are in these communities, they have a common language, they engage in practice with each other, they recognise that the community is valuable and they contribute to it. They understand that it brings them skills. They are in it for a period of time, not forever. They ensure that new people come into their community. And what happens with these communities is you start on the outside, and as you learn things, you move into the centre. So you're a beginner, but as you move into the centre, you become an expert, and then your role becomes teaching others. All of this happens organically. But if you have and if you're active in these communities, they build your confidence, they support you achieving goals, and one of the most important things they do is they teach you that when you fail, when you can't find work, when you don't get that job, it's not your fault. Because 90% of the time, it's not your fault. It's because of all other factors, and it's because the industry we work in is really, really hard. And so these communities are very valuable in that respect. And this leads to one other crucial thing, is they teach you what leadership in the arts is. Now, I should have blanked this out and said, can anyone tell me what a leader is? And I bet you all would have come up with 15 different examples of what a leader is. And then if I said, are you leaders? You'd all say, no, I'm not leaders. Both of those answers would be wrong, because you are leaders. There is no one definition of what leadership is. Leadership has been studied for over 150 years. No one has agreed on what leadership is. These are, how many? 6 of the 130,000 different theories around leadership. What communities do is they teach you what leadership is in your context. So if you participate in a community of practice or a career community, you can learn what arts leadership is in the theatre community in Singapore. It can be that specific. Or it'll teach you what leadership means in the visual arts community, because they're going to be different. So again, really, really valuable. So I mentioned this, as you can tell that I've forgotten what I put on my slides, that when you start in a periphery, you start as a novice, and through participation in your community, you build skills. Now, the important thing here is I'm talking about leadership and how to learn how to be a successful arts manager. The other thing these communities do is they can teach you how to find work in your sector. So I'm going to show you one slide near the end that talks about how we established a community at Melbourne, deliberately designed to help the community learn how to succeed and get work in the arts. These career communities, the ones that are specifically about building your career skills, are built on this framework called intelligent career theory. And these are 3 questions or 3 areas that I want you to think about. All of you who are out there looking for work, think about these 3 things. Knowing why. Now, knowing why means know yourself. Why? We know that you want to work in the arts because you're in this room. But what are your values? What type of organisation do you want to work for? What is your appetite for risk? What type of job do you want? Do you want to work on your own? Do you want to work in a team? Do you want to work predominantly on digital platforms? Know your own preferences, because that will help you determine where and how and who you want to work with. The second question is knowing how. Now that means the technical skills that you need, of which you're getting here through your degree, but it also is, how do I find a job in X? How do I become a producer? How do I become a curator? How do I become an artistic director? You need to learn what those steps are, and the way you learn them, through your community. Because there's no handbook. I might be writing a book, but the book is not going to say, follow this step, follow this step, follow this step. Because it changes. The way you get a job today is going to be different to the way I got a job 15 years ago. So you need to know how it works now. And linking back to this concept of community, and probably the most important, is knowing whom. This is linking it back to community. You need to know the people in your sector. And you know what's a word I haven't used that you all hate when it comes to getting to know people? Exactly. Networking, I don't like networking. Well, it's terrible. It sounds, no one wants to say hi, here's my business card. No. this is networking, but in a way that benefits everybody. Community is a better word than networking. I will die on this hill. So what does it look like for you? I said I was going to be, well, I say I'm longer than I said I was going to be. So what does it look like? Build a plan. Write it down. It can be on your phone. But build a plan. Understand the context of where you want to work. Understand yourself. And I know it sounds dorky, but set some goals. This is what I want to achieve. It doesn't have to be a 10-year plan, but it can be, this is the skill I want to learn, or this is the knowledge I want to gain, or this is the experience I want to have. The second is actually consciously build a community. You're already doing it, I promise you, but recognize it and put some energy towards it. Because it's not just about you, it's about what you give to others. And the more that you give to your community, the more you will get in return. So be generous. One of the questions I get asked at least 5 times a week is, how do I find a mentor? And the problem with this idea of mentoring is it's, can you tell me all your knowledge? It's a one-way concept. Community is a two-way concept. It's about, hey, let's work together, we'll both teach each other something, and we'll both get something out of it. Make your learning visible. You don't have to do anything here, there's no test. It just means recognize when you're developing skills. You're doing it anyway, but make it visible to yourself. Recognize when you're participating in something that is giving you benefit. Ask for feedback. You know, I'm sure you love getting assignment feedback, as much as we like giving it to you, but there is a purpose. So recognize there is a purpose to feedback. And also be self-aware about your skills. What do I need to know to succeed? And if you don't know what you need to know, ask someone. And the most important thing is support others to do the same. I was saying that one of the big changes I'm seeing in the interviews I'm doing now in 2024 compared to the interviews I did in 2015 is a recognition that we need to care for our community and that we need to care for the next generation and we need to develop others, even if we weren't developed ourselves. So just to end, I'll give you an example, and this is more for the academics in the room, but it can be started by anyone. So during COVID lockdown, I sat there and thought, well, maybe I should try and put this into practice. So I had all this research, but I thought, can I make this work? So what we did is we started a conscious career community at the University of Melbourne for arts managers and arts workers. And it's got 5 areas, you know, a digital hub, a Slack community that shares jobs and information. We have regular catch-ups where we just talk about careers, we talk about how to get jobs, we talk about managers who are difficult and everybody shares knowledge. We provide recruitment skills training, so we teach people how to do well in interviews, how to write good covers, letters, that type of basic stuff. And then we bring in industry specifically to teach our participants skills that help them get a foot in the door. So a good example is customer relationship software. So not something we teach in a curriculum, but I don't know what it's like here, but in Melbourne, half entry-level jobs say if you have Tessitura, which is a ticketing platform, that's advantageous. So we teach them Tessitura. And our students then find that they're getting promoted very early in these jobs. All of this is just the mechanics. The fact it is, the big part of it is the community that comes out of it. So I started this in beginning of 2022 and it's open to alumni, industry and students, and I've now got 350 members. And I go to sessions at the end of semester and everyone will be talking about the jobs that they are going for, the interviews that they've got, and most of it is coming from within the community because we refer jobs to each other, we tell them who to talk to in different organisations. It's, you know, it makes me cry. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing. And it honestly, it wasn't very hard to do. It was just a conscious effort, as in we just all showed up. So that's it. This is some of our community. This is from middle of last year. And you can see everyone's smiling and everyone's very happy. That's because we bought food. But you'll also see that there's quite a diverse community. We've got a lot of different ages, a lot of different backgrounds, and that's also, I think, been really important. And it's worth noting that in our program at Melbourne, 80% of students are international, and predominantly from China. And so for them, it's really hard to break into the arts, and that's what this is doing. So that's me. If you would like to talk about anything, don't ask me to review your resume because I get a lot of that. But you can find me on LinkedIn. But I encourage you to have these conversations, and I'm looking forward to hearing what our panel says about how it applies to them, or if it applies to them. Yes.
Thank you so much. I also must say that Kazim, you know Kazim, right? So he's a graduate of Arts and Cultural Management program from the University of Melbourne. And is he part of this community?
He's not. He was in my very, very first class I ever taught.
Yeah. And also the success of this community, I think, recognized on the university level because you received the Dean's Award, right?
Yeah.
So, and
yes.
Yeah, so she received a Dean's Award for engaging students by creating this community. I must say, it's a very prestigious award at the University of Melbourne. I once applied and I didn't get it. So it matters a lot. So thank you so much for that really interesting presentation, and just sets the right background for us to start talking about our own careers, right? So I would like to invite to the floor Shereen, the moderator, and all the panel.
Thanks, Natalia, and thanks, Dr. Kim. So the next section of this seminar, will be a discussion actually involving 3 members of the alumni network. We have Ben, Denise and Caspar, who will have the introductions right after this, but along the lines of the thematic kind of things that we're talking about today, we'll touch upon kind of an inquisition around collaboration and community before we delve a little bit deeper into cultures of learning and growth, and then finally we will talk a little bit more about the vision for the future of the arts management. So I will be handing over the mics to each one of them, who will be going through a short introduction of themselves. We will also be flashing slides that will help you connect with them if you are inspired to take the conversation beyond these walls. Thank you.
Thank you, Shereen. Hi, everyone. My name is Benedict. I'm a visual art practitioner that's based between Taiwan, Singapore, and Berlin at the moment. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel to basically share about what I know, and also because I'm predominantly working in the visual arts as a visual art practitioner. I can give more some of the examples about collaboration with different disciplines, as well as how I get like projects, and then also how I apply some of the arts management, including the network, or also like some of the theories into my practice. And so like arts management really helped me a lot in terms of expanding my practice, and also to kind of put my work into a larger scale that can access to other different parts of the industries. Yeah, so I'll hand my mic over to Denise.
Hello, hi, I'm Denise. I'm a content producer at Esplanade, where I produce digital content like articles, videos, podcasts for Esplanade's digital media arm called Offstage. And I'm also a producer and co-founder of a local theatre company called the Second Breakfast Company. Yeah. And then just, I guess, a little bit of background context to my career trajectory. I think I kind of went through the different phases. I was a freelancer, and then I worked with a startup, and then now I'm working in a large organization. So it's been quite interesting going through different phases. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, does this work? There we go. Okay. Hi, my name is Caspar. I am the founder of RAWSPARK. RAWSPARK is basically a creative agency. Our clients include UOB Bank, National Gallery, Ondays, Republic of Singapore Air Force, DBS Bank. And what we do is basically we combine the power of storytelling with arts, culture, and technology to create brand campaigns that make a brand succeed, stand out. When people ask, like, what was my career trajectory? Well, I came out of arts management, went into advertising, and then they go, oh, what is, how does arts management relate to you? Well, I like to answer it with a very succinct answer and go, for me, like, an artist, like, is a creative director is like an artist, but with a brief. So I'm like an arts manager with a brief, essentially. Yeah, I hope that summarizes.
Sorry, I just wanted to turn these so I can actually see everyone here. But thank you everyone for the introduction. And so to start with, I guess we've had a chance to understand how your career has progressed. And I think what we heard from Dr. Kim when you were talking about what progression looks like in arts management, it's non-linear. And I guess to start the conversation around career progression, what does progression look like to you in your journey, your personal journeys?
I guess I'll respond to that first. I really related to the squiggly graph that Dr. Kim had on her slide. For me, I did not have a very linear career progression. Yeah, like what I mentioned, I was working on multiple different projects, and along the way, it was kind of. Hello? Yes. I think I honestly related to what she mentioned about it being on yourself to kind of map out your career trajectory. So for me, I had to do a lot of reflection and also like you need a great degree of self-awareness to kind of like envision how you would want your career to pan out.
Yeah, okay. So for me, I'm in the visual arts. So actually, I started off studying at LASALLE Diploma in Fine Arts, actually, because I knew all along I want to practice as a painter. But then I didn't start with the trajectory of fine arts, where usually artists would go into galleries and then maybe to the museum. So I actually started off with construction companies, because I know that they would have sample housing, they would need the space to have a lot of artworks, and people, if they could afford to buy houses, they could also afford to buy my paintings as well. So that's kind of like, that's what I thought. And it's quite cool because usually if you think about in a gallery, sorry, I'm just giving an example. So in a gallery, usually you have 10 paintings, and maybe you have like openings and you have a lot of like parties and stuff, and they would only afford to buy maybe 1 or 2 paintings. But when I actually work with construction companies or also interior designers, they place my paintings all over the space, and a person just walked in, oh, I like everything, I'm just gonna get everything. And I actually got everything, and that really like, wow, like I was like, okay, maybe I will go toward that line. So I actually started from there. I knew that me being able to manage my own art career is far more than what the school provides, or the kind of linear trajectory that doesn't really work anymore. So that's kind of how I started off. So
It's a genius.
So I had the privilege of toggling between the 2 career trajectories, actually. So I started off pretty linear. When I graduated, I joined an agency, right? Started out there. And I worked about 6 years for an agency, actually. 6 years across 2 different agencies. And then the time came for me to, hey, I wanted to go out and be an actual entrepreneur, right? And I want to take the whole step. So I jumped over from that graph you saw just now over to the squiggly one, and just being an entrepreneur itself, it's a huge learning curve, right? Like, RAWSPARK started off in 2018 when I founded the company. It was literally just 4 people sharing one desk in a co-share workspace, right? So it was very hands-on. It was very hands-on, practical work, Today we are a company of 42 in total, right? And across 3 different countries in Singapore, Malaysia, and Melbourne. Yeah. So, and it's a lot to learn, right? Because you're learning now, with expansion, you're learning about other countries' cultures. You're learning about how they build their own communities, how they build their own ecosystems, and it's a huge learning curve. Every day is learning for me essentially. So again, I toggle between the 2. If I had the choice to pick one, I'd probably pick the squiggly one, I think. But
Well, thank you very much. I think it sounds a lot like promotion in a way, to us is our ability to have use the skills or apply the skills that we learn in arts management across different industries as well. And I'm just touching a little bit more on the point that Ben, you mentioned about this, kind of finding ways in which you can work cross industry to see how that builds your own practice as well. So my question is actually for Kim. When you were in the course of your research as well, and you really looked at communities of practice, did you see kind of turning points in which an arts management graduate's career or even arts manager's career grew or developed so much in practice from cross-industrial collaborations?
I think that's actually a really good point, because it raises this idea of where people in the arts work. So there is a model, research model out there called the creative trident, which suggests that arts workers can fall into 3 categories. One is creative people working in creative spaces and creative industries. I think even though you've crossed and you're into other sectors, you are a visual artist who creates visual art. The other are creative, non-creative people who support creative organisations, arts managers basically. So they are the people who do programming and education and finance, but work in creative places like galleries, that type of thing. The third group are people with creative skills who work outside of the arts and cultural sector. That is actually the biggest group in the world. The vast majority of people who are creative and arts workers do not work in the arts. I think we all can understand why. Money, largely. But they're the people who work in advertising, which is sort of the periphery, creative people in advertising. They are graphic designers in banks, they are software developers, they are all of those things. So this is what we say when we talk about your skills can be applied in a whole lot of different contexts. So understanding what those contexts are can be really valuable, because then you can come up with these genius ideas about, I'm going to use my creative skills but put them into a different environment where they pay dividends. And yes, so I think there is often a bit of an aha moment that people have when they think, okay, now I get where I can apply all of this. Because I think that's the hardest thing in the arts. We don't know where to do the things we want to do. We have to find, and the other thing, and I didn't really stress this, but Caspar is an exemplar, and in fact Denise is too, you all are, we often have to make our own space. Very few arts people walk into a job that's defined. The vast majority of us, and to get those jobs, to get the jobs, you actually have to show you can already create your own job first. The website, the Instagram account, you need to show that you can be entrepreneurial before you'll even get a serious job.
Thanks, Kim. That's amazing. I think also just understanding that when we're starting out, this idea of mutual support networks are so important And we need to strengthen the relationships that we have within our mutual support networks in order for us to understand what spaces we can find or fit or hold spaces for others also to come and collaborate with us. My question is actually for the three of you. When you started out your journey or your professional journey, how did you come about building communities within the arts ecosystem? What motivated you?
So I think for me, the very first thing was, first answer was value proposition, right? Like, how do we solve a problem? Like, especially when it comes to being in a creative agency, the idea is, how do we utilize the arts or leverage the arts to help create positive impact for brands, right? And in that case, how do we problem solve? So it's about, at the start, it was really about building that narrative, right? Building that narrative first, and then having collaboration. So then from that narrative, how do we bring that narrative to life with the other sectors of the arts? So for example, like visual artists, designers, creatives, musicians, so on and so forth, right? And then from there, how do you create stories that the brands can really leverage on, right? It started from there. Essentially, once you have that going, then you build community from there, right? And community is also really about how do we be uncomfortable, in a sense, how do we as creatives stick out as a sore thumb in other people's communities. So what happens, right, generally with a lot of communities is we get into like, visual design communities, music communities. What we try to do, how we try to survive in an industry that's really surrounded by corporate jargon, is really to stick out in those communities. We try to join them, right? Join Singapore FinTech Festival communities, join AsiaX Tech, which I'm a community leader of as well. And how do we then make creatives or arts about the narrative? How do we make that the solution to the problems that their communities face? And I think that's how we kind of thrive, right? And then I think the third part is also, how do we, as artists or creatives, bridge the gap between two different industries? Like in some of our work, or some of the work that we do, right? We try to combine industries that rarely mix together. For example, like the busking community of music with banks. And how do we use that to find a link so that, when we're impacting, how does the music industry impact banks, and how do banks impact the industry? And how do we create that story, right? And from that story, from that narrative, how do we create collaboration with other arts communities? So I think that's how we kind of, thrive in a sense. And I'm sure it's different for other sectors.
I think if we're talking about, the first types of communities we've built, for me personally, I actually had it rooted here in LASALLE. So I was very involved in a lot of the activities that were happening outside of my own course. So for example, if there was a call for assistant stage managers at technical production, then I would volunteer, and then I would meet the TP people there. And then when I graduate, those are the same few people that I would seek out to work with me on productions because I've worked with them in school. And even my first few jobs out of school were introduced to me by lecturers that I worked with here in LASALLE. So very much of my early beginnings, I would attribute to the community that I built here in LASALLE itself. Yeah, and then moving forward, it was then as I did more projects, productions, and then the micro communities that I built with each project, just like organically expanded my reach, and yeah, that's how I have been moving forward. Yeah.
So, excuse me. So for me, I'll share about two communities that's a bit different. As a visual art practitioner, so for me, I thought about what are the resources and communities that are the closest to me, and also that I do not need to use as much time to kind of access. So actually, a bit more personal story of mine is that actually my dad is a preacher in a church, And so, because he always preached around Taiwan, Singapore, and other regions, so he would just casually kind of like show my art to different people here and there. And then some of the church members, oh, your son can draw, you know, like, you want to try something? And actually, that got me a lot of projects at first in the church, yeah, in the religious setting. So I want to give a different perspective about like tapping into communities that are not in the arts. Actually, they are more from like sometimes I even think about like some of the friends my parents know that might actually give you the access to some of the places where you can learn, because it's very competitive, right? Like to step into different communities. So that's one. And the other one is if you're a creator, as a visual art practitioner, or you're a musician, you can also think about initiate your own projects and collaboration. So what I did is when I finished my diploma in fine arts, actually I wanted to study fashion, but my parents rejected that idea. They're like, no, you cannot go to fashion and stuff like that. So I actually went up to one of the fashion students, also graduated, and I was like, hey, do you want to collaborate? I want to try to see if my paintings can turn into like your garments or something like that. I don't know how to sew, but you know, like I just wanted like curious about it. And actually that one single connection of collaboration with different industry helped me a lot, because later on she invited me back to Vogue, Elle, and also like Singapore Design Week, National Museum. Like a lot of things actually started because you initiated a collaboration with different industries. So that's kind of where I see that community forming. Yeah.
Can I ask a question of the three of you? Because you've all given 3 different examples that are all perfect around sort of participating in these communities. How, or did you have to get over a level of discomfort or to put yourself out there? You know, and how did you do that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I can't go into a networking or community event without people asking me like, what the hell am I doing here? You know? And I think, but really that's the beauty of it, because if you're the only creative person in the whole world of banks, monopoly, right? I'm just kidding. Okay, so but the truth is actually, yeah, it's about being uncomfortable, and at the end of the day also trying to understand the topic. And it's okay to not be able to understand anything from an industry that you're not familiar with, right? I always look at every networking or every community event like a workshop, lesson, you know? I go there and I open my eyes, right? And the other side of advertising, there's a truth about advertising, which is in advertising, you're almost in every industry, because as an agency, you are always serving a client, and your client could be anyone from fashion to fitness to pharma, right? And being just going to that community event with an open mind, you know, just really helps a lot. And then from there, then I start thinking about how, as an artist, as a visual designer, as a creator, how can I add value to that community, right? And there are many other ways. There are so many ways, right? And it all starts from conversations. Yeah, does that answer? Yeah.
I think the good thing about sort of like my approach is that I'm less afraid, because I mean these are people that I've been with for 3 years. You know, I work with them. So yeah, like so Caspar and I are from the same class. So you know, when we graduate,
Smartest people.
yeah. If I didn't know Caspar, I would be afraid, you know, to approach him as a stranger. But you know, having been classmates for 3 years after graduation, if I had like video questions or anything, I could just easily, you know, drop him a message. Yeah, so I think for me, not so much. Yeah.
Start with the people you know.
Yeah. It helps to kind of ease you into the world out there. Yeah.
For me, I'm a painter, so I always stay in my studio. So it's always it's very uncomfortable for me to talk to people. But I think, yeah, because I feel like maybe I started with the different communities, which is like in a religious setting, and then my dad would just be the one like, you know, look at my son, blah blah blah, 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 like all this thing. And then I feel that because of that, over time, I get to really hear different views and different community buildings through non-art related people. And that helped me a lot because I get to really understand if you're a non-arts or like cultural kind of setting, the people in that industry, like how would they view your stuff? And that actually helped me to build my confidence of being observant and knowing how to translate my practice into things that people could understand and they can like take in, rather than like explaining my art and like this very conceptual idea to only people in the arts would understand. Yeah, so that's how I see it.
Thank you, and thanks, Kim, for the question. I think that was also a follow-on question I had about, what sort of spaces do you find easiest for you to kind of break into as a starting point? At this point, I actually want to just open the floor to questions. If there are any questions from audience members, to anyone on the panel or also to Dr. Kim.
Sorry, you go first.
You.
Okay. Sorry, I don't need my microphone. I'll project my voice. Thank you to all of you for your sharing, and Dr. Kim, thank you for your presentation. Could I ask the three of you, what inspired you to study arts management? Because that's the starting point. You have done very well, and we're very happy for you, but how did you start?
Maybe I can share first. Actually, for me, I after I finished diploma in fine arts, I had to do 2 years of NS and then went back to Taiwan to settle my NS again in Taiwan, which I didn't have to do luckily. And then after that, what happened is that the pandemic hit and all, and but then because of that, I took an art residency in Taiwan, and I started to collaborate with theater producers, also musicians, and also like zines maker and all. And I started to realize that, I should really look into different fields and disciplines and collaboration. But I knew that I didn't have that skill set of managing and to think in different shoes. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll apply for arts management. But the funny thing is, it's also, I think it's something that the spirits have planned it for me. So when I settled my Taiwan NS problem, which I didn't have to serve luckily, I went back to LASALLE and I checked if I could apply for BA Fine Arts. I was late for 2 days. And then I actually, and I was like, oh, please, I emailed them, like, please, I was from Diploma of Fine Arts, and then I really wanted to study Fine Arts in BA. They're like, no, you couldn't. So I was like, what? Okay, and then so what happened is that I look back, so I kind of cried that night. And the next morning, when I look at arts management, it was 1 week after most of the programs. I was like, this is the, this is the sign. So I applied. So I think sometimes it has a, something a plan, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, so that's how I chose arts management.
For me, I after JC, when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do next, one thing that I knew that I didn't want to do was to get a 9-to-5 job, which is quite ironic because I'm in a 9-to-5 job now. But yeah, so when I was kind of like exploring my options, I think I chanced upon arts management, and I don't think I knew what I was signing up for back then, but it seemed very interesting, and I was previously from my drama club in my JC also, so I had like kind of 1 foot in the arts world, and then I decided to apply for it.
I think if I had to give a one-word answer on why I joined arts management, it would be curiosity. So when I was young, when I was 5 years old or 6 years old, I remember telling my mom that I wanted to be a rock star. That's true. She still rolls her eyes until today. 7 years old, I told my mom that I wanted to be a filmmaker. 12 years old, I told my mom I wanted to be a designer. Well, fast forward, after national service, there's a correlation between the three, right? Creative. So I wanted to find a degree that could combine the three together, because those were like my passions. I wanted to do all three without being a musician, designer, and filmmaker. I wanted to be like a generalist, right? That was true. And number three, I wanted to find a way, and I won't lie, to do the three and pay the bills. So that was that. That was the three reasons. Yeah, but it all started from curiosity.
Thank you.
Just curious, when you all share about your benefits or something you learn, you gain from joining communities, is there any instances where you feel responsible to step up as a leader, and you feel any experience of that, or actually it's not good, you know? I shouldn't feel like I should step up, or anything to share about this?
Okay.
The short answer to that is yes and no. I think the benefit of having a community is that you, for lack of a better word, I won't say obliged, but you are encouraged, right? To share knowledge, to give value to the person next to you. Sometimes that could be bad as well, right? But then again, I think it's about, again, being open to learning, being open to receiving. Knowledge gained must be knowledge shared. That's what I always tell myself. And just be okay being uncomfortable, you know? Yeah. So.
I'll let you into a little secret. My whole PhD was not about careers, or I told people it was about careers, but it actually was about one question. It was about me sitting across the table from people just like this and saying, do you consider yourself a leader? And they all said no. And they were all chosen because they were leaders. You know, I could see they were leaders. They were nominated by their community as leaders, emerging leaders, young leaders, but they were all leaders. But there was this reluctance to identify, to use that label. And so actually that's a whole other side of the research that I do, is on why are arts people in particular so uncomfortable with this idea of leadership. And I think one of those terms, or one of those reasons, is back to that slide where I had 6 different titles for what type of leadership is. We all think leadership is something we're not. You know, it's the person running the big organisation, it's the person on television, it's the person standing up giving a lecture. And we all say, oh, well, I'm not that, so I can't be a leader. But what we don't realise is leadership, particularly in the arts, is a million different things. And what it is predominantly is bringing disparate groups of people together to achieve a common goal. Not hierarchy, not titles, but you know, it's being a rock star, a video producer, and a copywriter and everything to make an ad or to produce digital content. It's bringing together, like theatre is the ultimate example. You know, theatre is about bringing all sorts of people with different skill sets together to produce one magical performance. And even if you're a visual artist that it prefers to be at home in your studio, you know, away from others, you still need to get your work to the audience. You still need to sell it or get audiences to see it. And to do that, you need the real arts manager in his family, which is his dad. Clearly. You know, so that's all leadership as well. So I think it's a really good question, because it's something that we need to think more about, that leadership is not, it's not, you know, status and hierarchy and title. It's about achieving change.
Thank you.
That is so important. Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. And I think it's also important for us to understand that leadership in this sector also means being participatory in the nature of conversations that we have with one another. It's about working together, not for consensus, but truly consultation. And so what emerges from there is genuine kind of collaboration together with people that we see within our communities. So in closing, any other questions? One.
Sorry. Hi. So I had the pleasure of working with Ben and Caspar on multiple occasions, really. Ben in school and at work somehow, and Caspar commercially. So, but to the three of you, I have two questions. First of all, is how do you navigate the balance between promoting artistic vision and meeting financial goals and expectations? That's the first question. Would you like to take that question first before I go to the next question?
So for me, I think I apply like this management in my own timeline of making. So for example, in 1 year, me as a visual art practitioner, I would have 1/4 of my year to be overseas residencies. That's where I practice my vision, artistic vision, and to reach out to more creative in terms of like institutions, museums, galleries. That's my own practice as a visual art practitioner. But I spend 3/4 of my year would be working in commercial sectors, into going back like to the construction companies, and also to work with other museums for commercial jobs. So I do always kind of keep that balance of like 3/4 and 1/4 in my own practice. Yeah, that's how I manage it.
So how we manage it, how I manage it rather, is I start by identifying the problem statement first, right? Usually of a client, stakeholder, investor, whichever. I identify that problem statement, I find out where they want to get to, their objective. In the middle, that's my narrative. So that's the message that I build. Now, what I do is once I've got that message, I'm free to play with my artistic vision, right? And it's all about, can my idea that's made by a dozen visual designers, 3 artists and musicians and whatnot, can that idea that they've created reach A, communicate that message, B, solve that problem, 3, hit that message, right? Or that objective. If I've got that, then that's great. That's how I achieve it. We've also got a saying in the company, across all our creatives, there are no bad ideas. There are no bad ideas. No, wait, actually I lie. There are only bad ideas. The client picks the best bad idea. Yeah, it's true. So because the truth is, every idea that we pitch, there's always time, resources, cost involved, right? They pick the one that is the most creative, but they could do with the easiest time, resources available. So it's the best bad idea, and that's where we go. And once we start opening up those doors, the creatives just go, oh, they can start thinking of, well, the minute you start saying, putting labels to them, like good ideas, great ideas, no. Then they're not being experimental, then they're not making mistakes. But failure is a very big thing for a creative, right? We learn through pivoting, through failures. When you launch a campaign where you test A and B, that's a failure that you're learning from, essentially.
I think for me, it's being very clear about what your non-negotiables are. And then also, I think there is power in saying no. And also, there's a lot of it is also, I feel, is in the art of communication and relationship building. Yeah, like if you approach something as a very transactional kind of thing, they will also reciprocate in that manner. So it's also a lot of nuance in how you are communicating to them and building that relationship. And then finally, I think is finding the right partners for you and finding partners that align with your vision and finding those connections as a starting point to build something. Yeah.
We have time for only one question, so if no one has burning questions, I'll hand it over to Walter.
Alright, so I think this panelist here presents a very unique opportunity. We see 3 very distinct generations of arts managers here. Not that far off, sorry, but distinct enough. So I guess my question then would be, as a recent graduate of the course as well, can you share your visions for the future of arts management and how you, or rather how we, can plan or how we can contribute to this scene?
No pressure.
Loaded question with a very deep MC voice is gone.
You asked for it over LinkedIn, so I was like,
I'm now regretting it. Sorry guys, my fault. You guys want to take the answer first? No?
Maybe I can share it. That's I'll be the first one. Okay. So for me, I'm still. I would say I always give from the perspective as a visual art practitioner. So I know all of you are in the arts management field. So for me, I always self-check about my values and what it matters to me the most. And especially after I came back from Berlin, I started to focus a lot on spirituality as my core values in whatever I do. So now I'm looking into virtual reality, spirituality practices. And I know that this topic could dwell between commercial fields of VR and also going to Unreal Engine and all that. But also it's an intrinsic value that I value the most. So I think that self-check of what matters to you the most would bring you far to the vision. So I think as I just graduated last year, so I was still kind of navigating as well. But I think for arts management graduates, I think it's super important to look back at what you really want. And of course, I think in the industry, you probably would always get things that are not really adhere to your value all the time, and you probably have to kind of move around a little bit until you get to that place. So I think to self-check and to be aware of that's kind of how I see my route of vision to be walking toward. Yeah.
Oh, I go first. Okay. So so my value as a creative or as an artist or whatever you want to call me, essentially is I think it's okay to be different. I think it's okay. In fact, it's better to be different, right? So in that case, I think in that sense, my vision is that we build a community of arts managers that's that's really open. B, we embrace change. We are adaptive to change, right? Whatever is happening socially, in technology, culture, so on and so forth, right? We adapt to that. And then C is that, the lines between arts management and the other industries can kind of blur in a good way, in a sense that, companies, brands, artistic or not, would be able to see the value of the arts and the impact that they can bring. Whether or not it's culturally or economically, doesn't matter, as long as we can create that positive impact.
Wow, this is a really tough question. My vision as an arts manager, I think for me, much like him, I graduated 8 years ago, but I'm also still navigating this profession. And I think at this point, the vision that I have is sort of sustainability and sustained curiosity in how we approach the arts, how we promote the arts, and how we advocate for the arts. I just hope that this profession continues to be something that's sustainable and viable in many, many, many years to come, and that the industry continues to grow, and we'll have different types, in the future, maybe this whole lecture theatre will be filled with arts managers, because we would have such a buzzing, vibrant art scene. Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to follow on from that because I think it's a good progression. My personal philosophy about what arts management can be, it is aligned very much to our program at University of Melbourne's sort of mission statement, if you like, and that is to make the arts a great place to work. So we want the arts industry to flourish and to achieve those community goals and to contribute to the community by making it a place that we as arts managers can have thriving, sustainable, enjoyable careers that give us everything we want, and to make the arts a sector that our parents will say, yes, you can go and be an artist because it's a great place. It's a great place to build a career. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but as students, we often feel that we are on the outside of our sector looking in, and you're all here looking for the key. What's the magic key that's going to open the door and get me that job in the arts? But what you don't realise is you're already in it. You are the arts sector already. So we can make the change that we want by doing things differently from now. So that's that's the mission that I hope we can achieve.
Thank you. Just to offer a perspective as well, as someone who has graduated from arts management, actually just a year after this too, so we're quite familiar with one another. Careers, communities, and leadership continue to exist if we continue to find our place as arts managers within the society and how it has held space for us in the arts. So if we don't grow in complement to society's constant evolution, then we will find it difficult for us to be sustainable and, as Denise mentioned, and for us to create an impact, as Caspar mentioned. So it needs to continuously evolve. The curriculum needs to change year on year as society changes as well. And yeah, it's about being amenable to change, continue thinking about the impact that we can give as well.
Just last question to the panel. We have a lot of year 3 students in this room right now, and many of them, I would imagine, feel nervous about graduating and entering this field of arts management, which we understand is so complex to navigate, right? So I just want you, each of you, to give a tip, just to show how do you navigate this difficult moment? How do you overcome a failure? How do you put yourself together to go forward no matter what happens? Because everybody of us, faces at one point of time this. So I think each of you have some good, advice to share on that. In my case, for example, I finished my BA degree, which was in linguistics and literature, so absolutely useless. So in the place where I lived in Russia, and for several years, I was just volunteering for free in the arts sector, and then suddenly I saw online arts management degree, master's, and I escaped, my problems because I was a failure, right? I was not having any money with what I'm doing. I was doing it because I was very passionate. I wanted to be around artists. I wanted. So I just escaped. I just ran away to do my master's, but it changed the whole my life. Arts management degree, right? So how do you, because you're super successful, I can see all of you. You're amazing. I adore you, admire you. So how do you go over a very difficult moment where you face and you understand, oh, it's difficult, it's tough for you now. What do you do next?
So for me, I would say you want to, because there are not many opportunities, I would say that you might be able to access directly. So initiate your own, initiate your own project first. I think that was always a good starting point. It's kind of like I kind of adhere to that idea of volunteering. Not many things would start off to be involved with money, but also when you volunteer, when you also initiate projects, like when I initiated with this fashion student who just graduated as well, that brought me far. And I never thought that would actually be one of the important point of my life that would change my entire career. So I think to get involved, and I know a lot of the third-year students and second-year students have been quite involved in the Singapore art scenes as well. I see them everywhere. I'm very happy to see that because not anything has to be tied to job. And I think to just be involved in the arts and the music and theater and all the scenes are so important because you train your eyes and you train your experience. So once you start to have a job, a real management job, you get to see things holistically, and that is very important values and things that you learn it yourself. So I think start from there, initiate things by yourself first, and you will face a lot of rejections. Like apply for grants, don't get it. Initiate projects, people reject me, like who you are, you know, like like your stuff is like, so like things like that. So it's very common. I think rejection actually makes me even get more motivated. Like I need to be better. I think this is not enough, and I have to be better and better. Yeah.
I think never stop learning. Yeah, that's one important thing. So every day is always learning something new, right? And it's not just about new skills, right? Like go out there, learn new skills. Working at a new firm all the time also teaches you new things. Failures also teach you new things, right? So I think what we need to do a lot as arts managers also is reflect on the work that we've done, reflect on the projects that we've done, reflect even on our actions, little actions that we've done for the projects themselves, right? Always have that. I always keep a diary for myself of what are my learnings and how do I pivot from there? What could I have done better? What could I have done different? So on and so forth. So it's always good to have that. Always be very curious with what you have, with where you are. Always ask the right questions. Always ask any question rather, right? And the third thing also is to be open with your role as an arts manager, really, right? Like I think we also don't want to just put ourselves in a box and go arts management as a role, but look at arts management as a strength, as a skill set as well. How can we get out there and what is the value that we can add to industries out and beyond the arts as well? So yeah, just again, be open, right? Yeah.
I think for me is articulating to yourself what is it you find meaningful in the work that you do, what is it that brings you joy, and this might evolve, but just having this at the back of your head so that when things get really tough, it's sort of like a motivation for you to keep on going. Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up these and by articulating sort of three things, summarizing a few things that they said, the panel said. And I should say, I graduated with a Master's in Arts Management as well and thought, I'm never going to get a job. It's going to be a disaster. Of course, it all works out, I promise. The first is think skills, not experience. So, and this is something we actually have to teach organisations too. They need to think skills, not experience. You need to show what you can do, what you've got the capability to do, not what you have done. What you have done is just taught you the things you can do in the future. So talk about your skills, not just the jobs you've had. The second is picking up what Denise said, know your worth and trust your instincts. Any job is not the right job. If you go into a project or an interview and your stomach is saying, don't take this is not right for me, trust it, because you'll regret it. And the final one is don't personalise rejection, which Ben said. We all get rejected. The arts is full of rejection constantly. Don't internalise it, because that can be hard to shake off.
All right, thank you very much. Very insightful sharing from everyone. We will still be hanging around here if anyone wants to continue having conversations with the panelists. But otherwise, thank you for joining us this evening. Round of applause.